The framework itself is very simple. In fact, Terry was describing this to me last night. Some other CEOs and CFOs explain it as an elegant framework. Elegant meaning it's simple, yet it's complete at the same time. That's the definition of elegance that one CEO presented at a conference. And in the middle, at the heart of it, is innovating the offering. There's really 7 questions that we usually work with management teams on in this regard. We ask them the question. Let's say we have a new offering, a product or service offering. We ask 7 basic questions using this framework. Number 1, what's the unmet need? How otherwise unmet is that need? For how long will that need be unmet? That's tenet number 2, which is on the left side on the second row. That's the first question we address. The second question is, are we targeting the right customers, right? Do those customers actually have that otherwise unmet need? How many customers are there? Are the number of customers growing, shrinking, or are they stagnant? That will define growth for us moving forward. Then we go to the next row below it. How can we innovate our offerings to fulfill those unmet needs for the targeted customers? How can we deliver on it? How can we brand and market those offerings? Those are the next 3 questions. So we're up to 5 questions. The 6th question is on the bottom, genuine assets. Why us? What gives us the competitive advantage or genuine assets to provide that offering where others will have not a competitive advantage? That includes customer intelligence, customer relationships, supply chain knowledge and relationships, financial resources, and so forth. It also means we address what are the missing genuine assets? What don't we have that can lead to our failure? And how can we perhaps partner to achieve those missing genuine assets? And the 7th question is right at the top of the pyramid. Is it going to allow us to ethically maximize value, shareholder value? Is it going to generate returns that are sustainable and superior that will ultimately drive valuation, whether you're a private company or a public company? Those are the 7 questions, just to put it in about a minute-and-a-half summary. This is the framework. Let's apply it to a high-performing company that's defied gravity over the last 3 or 4 years. That will be Apple. So Apple's a great example of a company that's innovated its offerings on 3 platforms in sequence: the iPod, the iPhone, and now more recently, the iPad. Those have transformed 3 markets significantly, and they're going to lead to sustained growth for Apple. You look at Apple's performance charts. On that chart, you'll see their ROIs, they were not a high-performing company up to about a few years ago. They were actually a mediocre to a below-average company in terms of ROI growth and stock performance. It wasn't until they actually did focused growth and innovation strategies in those 3 pillars that led to their resurgence and, I think, a sustainable level of performance moving forward. One of the things we talk about in using this framework is think like a winemaker. Winemakers prune their vineyards carefully, right, to achieve high-quality growth, meaning less is more in that perspective. There's a 7-stage process that we use with management teams, like Terry's company. It's very simple. It really focuses on, it's very biased for action, very unbiased in terms of spending a lot of time planning. It means come up with those ideas and move forward. It's very entrepreneurial in that regard. Here's a simple example. This is at Kraft Foods. Now, Kraft Foods is it's a very large company, a global company. But they actually became more entrepreneurial in terms of some of their growth strategies. This is an example of a growth strategy. It was taking the Oreo cookie, which is a market leader in the United States, North America, but in China, it was actually a product they were going to pull from that market because it was doing so poorly. It wasn't until looking back at that framework, if you remember the framework we had, they reassessed the unmet need in China is different than the unmet need in North America. So what they did is innovated the offering, right? Redesigned the Oreo cookie, made it less sweet, made it smaller, added the green tea flavoring. That's the innovate the offering. They had a good infrastructure for delivering it within China, including how they marketed it, sending people on bicycles across the country, giving out samples, small samples of Oreos. And they also marketed it through their basketball star, in terms of demonstrating how you twist, dunk, and eat an Oreo, in terms of educating the customer on how to actually use your product. There are other examples like the Tang innovation in Brazil, and also the other examples of products that we study as far as the craft food innovation. A large global company that's become more entrepreneurial. You know, we often use the analogy that you have a continuum of entrepreneur here and you have bureaucrat here, right? And when I work with organizations, I always try to assess the corporate culture. How bureaucratic is it versus how entrepreneurial is it? Entrepreneurial organizations create more sustainable value, right? The definition of an entrepreneur by the French economist Jean-Baptiste Say in the 1800s, the definition was very clear. It was one who takes something and creates more value with it. That's the entrepreneur. That's based on a French word, based on the French economist Say. Another French word is bureaucrat, based upon the French word which means one who rules from a desk. So if you look at your own corporate culture, think about how entrepreneurial on a 1 to 10 scale versus how bureaucratic is your organization. The framework, return-driven strategy in the book Driven, can help organizations become more entrepreneurial, even though it's applied in both large and small companies. The sequel book will be out next year by Stanford University Press called Driven Strategy. It's really how companies can use return-driven strategy in that approach. So with that, I'd like to introduce Terry, who he'll give you some perspective from a CEO's perspective, how he brought those ideas into his company, a private company, and was able to generate a significant amount of growth and profitable growth over the last several years. And it's going to really reinforce some of the tenets of return-driven strategy and how he used it.